Welcome to Real Estate Development Land to Legacy podcast.
Real estate development.
My guest today is Mike Kaeding, a residential real estate builder and developer. He is transforming the way apartments are built and managed by incorporating technologies and efficiencies that have revolutionized other industries and lead to high quality, cost effective projects. I'm a geek, Mike. Tell me more. I want to know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, thanks for having me. And it just at a really high level, if you look at other industries like the world of manufacturing over the past 60 years, they've improved labor productivity by 760%. In the world of construction and development, it's a nothing. We've been stuck at like 10% over 60 years. It's been terrible. And so all we've done is we said, okay, let's learn from these other guys. Let's learn from manufacturing and apply their insights into the world of construction. And as a result, we've been driving down the cost of construction and development by 20 to 30%.
That's pretty significant. Give me an example. What types of things that you borrow from other industries?
Yeah, so one of the first things we had to do was to lay the groundwork to be able to even do this work. And so to do that, we had to bring all of the trades in-house. So for us, we have plumbers, electricians, HVAC. We are the developer. We're also the architect and the engineer. We're the wall panel manufacturing, precast concrete, everything. And once we did that, now we control all the different levers and we can apply some simple techniques. One example is the assembly line. I know, revolutionary, crazy, right? Well, how in the world can you take a building and drive it down a line? Well, you can't. But what you can do is you can take the person and move them through the building. So right now, every 5 hours, we complete a brand new apartment unit. And every 5 hours, each team, the plumbers, electricians, HVAC, they all shift through the building by one unit. And that one technique takes a project that might take 15 months and drives it down to 9.
Okay, so is it pre-manufactured? Are you building it off-site, or is it all built on-site?
It is hybrid. And so we do have our own factory that builds some of the materials off-site. We don't build everything off-site because then you're shipping a lot of air. And you can still get a lot of those same efficiencies on-site if you're just managing it appropriately.
Gotcha. Okay, that's interesting. How do you keep? I have a million questions. How do you keep all these trades busy all the time? I get it. Electricians have to be on site pretty much the entire time. But once you're done with concrete, what do you concrete guys do next?
Yeah, so you really have to think about this as a really long pipeline. So the first thing we do is you line project after project after project. And then you've got to have the architects and engineers who can think the right way to design the projects to be efficient for construction. And it's a lot more work than your typical architect and engineer, where they're only developing a project to meet code and nothing more because they don't want to spend the time to do all that extra work. So then yeah, you got the electricians are going unit by unit by unit, but you also have trades like you mentioned, concrete. What we do there is we think about the project by units, but also by what we call towers. So our buildings are typically 5 stories tall with 1 story of underground parking. What we do is we shrink that tower to be the smallest footprint possible. Maybe it's only 5 or 6 units. So you go over, you build 5 or 6 units, and then you're climbing up the second, third floor, fifth floor. Then you do your next tower, then climb on up. But what that lets you do is now your concrete guys, they're they're kind of moving at a consistent pace as well, just ahead of the rest of the trades. And so when you design it right, you can get it so that everyone's busy at all times.
Are some of the trades what's the word? Not overlap, but do your concrete folks also do framing, and then do they also do drywall, or are you still employing different craftsmen for different trades?
We're employing different craftsmen for different trades. So There is a little bit of overlap in that one of the things you want to do to run the system efficiently is you want to do some cross training. So when you talk about a project, there might be 100 different tasks to complete one apartment unit. And there, of the 100 tasks, there might be 3 or 4 related to plumbing, a few related to electrical work. But what you want to do is a little bit of cross training, so that way, if one of the tasks gets behind or ahead, that people behind or ahead of them can kind of help step in and fill some of those gaps. So there is a little bit of cross training, a little bit of collaboration to help each other out. But generally speaking, an electrician's an electrician and a plumber is a plumber.
Gotcha. Do you use any specific cool modern technologies?
You know, we we do, and we are working on some. One of my favorites right now is the engineer and architecture team. They're not just thinking about designing a particular building. They're stepping back and saying, how do we create software and systems in place that someone can give us a site plan and we can compute out an efficient design for that building, for that site plan, almost programmatically and automatically in a way that gives us our entire costs, our entire schedule that all kind of computes out of that system. So it's kind of a fun piece of the puzzle. But a lot of people want to race off to technology. And my degree is in computer science. I love technology. It's a huge piece of this. And like, okay, another fun one is robots that can paint walls. And there's excavation equipment that can literally carve out and excavate everything you need automatically. And we're definitely in talks and working with those different groups. But more importantly than all of that is sort of the boring stuff. It is building out a team that is willing to fix what bugs them, to identify issues, to raise those issues, and have an infrastructure in place to solve all of those issues. It's not the big shiny thing that drives down costs. It's solving the 10,000 little problems that you have that actually meaningfully drive down cost.
Yeah, I keep looking at all these robots that do drywall and or like plaster rather, and paint, as you mentioned. And I'm like, why can't a robot like tile or do hardwood or?
It's coming. It'll
I'm sure it
eventually be
is.
here, but it's not here today.
Right, right. Do you use AI at all?
We use AI in not necessarily fundamentally to the business, but as we're doing work, a lot of us have ChatGPT open, helping us address different issues and things that we're working on. But I definitely see it as being the way of the future.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you do your own architecture and engineering as well.
That's correct. Both of them in house.
So you own the land, you do your own architecture, engineering, you do your own construction. So essentially, you are taking on the risks of all these trades. If something's drawn right, you can't blame a third party. It's your fault. If you screw up in the field, it's also your fault. And if you didn't time the market right, it's once again your fault. How do you manage? How do you mitigate all this risk?
Yeah. So one of the best ways to mitigate problems being your fault is to avoid having those problems, right? And you're not always going to avoid all of them, but we used to work with a lot of subcontractors and a lot of outside engineers. And frankly, we've had many more problems in that scenario than when we brought the teams in house. Now, it wasn't that way initially. Like we had to go through a number of different architects and different engineers before finding the right team. But one of the things I have learned is that you want to hire the best. And when I mean the best, I truly mean the best. We have employees one employee that in 2007, Steve Jobs announced the iPhone. He walked off stage and our employee followed him on that very same stage. It's that kind of caliber of people. And when you bring that caliber of people together, A, you have much less problems, but B, when you do, you can work to just solve them. And when it's all your own team, you're not finger pointing and blaming, you're just working together to solve the issue. Now, there are issues that are outside of our company. And one of the ones you mentioned is market risk. What happens when interest rates go up or when rental rates go down, right? That is a risk we face. But one of the big things that helps insulate that from us is that we have lower costs, right? So when everyone else gets pulled out of the market because they can't make the numbers work, our projects still work.
It's awesome. I'm a strong believer in having a very strong, experienced team in order to get the best results. How do you how do you find these people? How do you know that they're the best? Everybody tries to sell themselves as they're the best, but you don't know until you actually spend some time with them. What's your trick?
Oh my gosh, there's so much to this. Um, First and foremost, you have to build the right culture, which means you've got to be in the right mindset. You got to have values and things that line up to that. But I'll put that aside. I'm assuming now you're just a great company. People want to come work for you. The next thing we did is we ended up hiring our own recruiting team. And the big thing we did differently is we started building out a knowledge base of everyone in our market that had the skills that we were looking for. And there's certain databases and stuff that you can get access to. Then we worked to build relationships with those people. They're not looking for jobs. Build relationships with those people way in advance of them looking for a job. And then as we had roles open up, we could tap on the shoulders of those people that we'd been building relationships with because we knew they'd be a good fit within our company. Um, then you're right. Everyone can say that they're great, and it's just not the case. Uh, so we've got multiple rounds of interviews for a lot of our positions, not all of them, but a lot of them. We'll actually do trial periods, which means for the first 2 weeks, you're not actually hired on. You get paid, you're an employee, but you're not officially formally part of the company. At the end of those 2 weeks, your coworkers make the decision whether or not you stay on with the company or not. And that's a huge gaining thing. And then I would say the last thing is even with a bunch of things in place up front, we still don't always get it right. So then we stole Netflix's keeper test. And this test is pretty simple. It's if a particular employee were to quit, how hard would you fight to change their mind? If the answer is you would fight for them hands down, great, they're the right person. Anything less than that, they're not the right person. If they're not a hell yeah, then they're a no. And so we engage in that keeper test on a regular basis to move people out of our company that ultimately just weren't panning out the way that we had hoped. And you put all that in place, our acceptance ratio into our company right now is 0.4%, which is far lower than the industry average.
That's right. Industry average has been much higher, and especially in the last few years, construction industry has experienced a huge shortage of qualified labor. How long did it take you to put together this amazing team?
Years. And
Yes.
it takes a lot of time and attention. But what the interesting thing is, once you start building out such a great team, what you do is you start getting pockets in the company that are truly extraordinary. And once you start getting a taste of what extraordinary teams really look like, when people are really on the same level, they're actively interacting with each other, they're performing at a really high level, they're producing incredible results. Once you see what that truly looks like, and frankly, most companies, most teams never hit it. But if you get a taste for that, you realize how good it can be. And that becomes this drug that lets you keep going and never stopping until every team within your company is at that level. And it takes years to really get there.
Did you sort of have this whole plan premeditated when you started with the company, or did it sort of evolve? Did this plan evolve over time?
I wish it was all premeditated, but it's not. It definitely evolved. Um, another important lesson I've learned is you just got to get into the weeds and like get out there and just start acting, doing, behaving, right? You're never going to know everything before you jump in. I wish we did. I wish we did. I wish that was true, but it isn't. And so you got to get in there and you're going to scrape your knee. You're going to screw it up. Like I messed before realizing we need to hire the best. I didn't know that. And we hired teams that were not nearly that level. And I failed as a result at times because of that. We've had, We've learned the lesson of if you take on too many trades and too many things at once, like your costs don't go down initially. They actually get worse before they get better. And you've got to be able to handle that. And so there's got to be a steady flow of change and not doing too much at once. And so you just have to get in and act and learn and tweak and change as you go along. You're not going to know everything out before you get started.
You've been very successful, clearly. What would you say was your biggest professional fail?
One of my, I guess, kind of taking a step back a little bit with our story is, this was originally a family business. My parents started it very small growing up. I was out there sweeping, picking up nails, building little walls. In fact, my family lost everything growing up. My dad was actually kidnapped in Peru. Crazy side story. And eventually I came on full time with the company after kind of working past my own ego because I didn't want to originally. But shortly after joining, my dad suddenly passed away. And so here I am, this pipsqueak kid. And at the time, we were doing this small apartment building. And I didn't understand the importance of relationships. And I kind of broke one of the relationships I had with the city council. And so there was this kind of already a little bit on edge with me. And then once we got on site, the city staff, they're nitpicking everything, which they should. They should make sure we're doing a great job. But my dad had just passed away and they didn't think I could do it. Frankly, I questioned if I could do it myself. And they actually shut us down twice. It was terrible. And the second time they shut me down, they said, Mike, I'm sorry, but we don't think you can do this. You need to hire someone else who can step in and manage this project for you. That was one of the worst days of my life. And my crew was completely shut down unless I could solve this problem. I ended up finding someone to fill that role quickly. Terrible way to hire someone that ended up not being a good fit, but it gave us some breathing room. So behind the scenes, we could work our tail off to get everything done, make sure everything is in the right place for the city. And I remember about a month or so before we were supposed to open, the excavator was on site and there was a 1,500-foot long pipe buried 15 feet in the ground. And somewhere in this pipe, there was a pinhole water leak. And we could see it in the test, but we had no idea where it was. So I was out there in my nice clothes, digging and shoveling, looking for this leak with the excavator, who wanted nothing to do with their site. He wanted to leave. Eventually, we found the leak. And a few days beforehand, before we were supposed to open, the city staff came out and said, Mike, there's no way. There's no way you're opening this building. And I've got families that are moving in. Anyway, we worked through the night. And I remember the very last day, about a half a dozen inspectors were on site for a half a day inspection. And they looked at every nook and cranny of that building. And the end of the inspection, the head building official pulled me aside in the parking garage. And I'll never forget this day. He pulled me aside and said, Mike, I know we were hard on you, but honestly, looking at this project today, this is the best project that we have opened in our city. I was like, finally. It was like that moment, that turning point for me to realize that maybe I can actually do this.
Wow, that's amazing. What would you say was the lesson learned for you from this experience?
Oh, so many lessons. There's the practical lesson of like, there are standards, there are codes that you have to meet, and you've got to meet them at a very deep, thorough level. Every I has to be dotted, every T has to be crossed, to the point where we had to compile a binder of every single product we were using in the building and the safety specifications with that product. Because if someone used some caulk and happened to get that caulk in their eye, they need to know what they have to do to solve that problem in that case. We were not anywhere near that level at that time. My dad wasn't either, frankly, but we got all those binders in place. It's technical details like that were important. But at a broader level, one of the important lessons I've learned is the importance of relationship. I early on in the city council, I believed that they were charging us some fees that they shouldn't be charging us for. Frankly, I had the law behind me, and our attorney said, "Yeah, you're right. If you take this to court, you're likely going to win." Um, but in bringing up that issue and saying, basically threatening to take them to court over it, I did it nicely, but just the threat in and of itself created the city council and said they became very hostile to me as a result. And I learned that you can be legally right, but it doesn't matter if you don't have the moral high ground, if you don't have the relationship, it just doesn't matter, and the relationship trumps all.
Relationship trumps all. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
So, if one wants to develop a project, we commonly talk to property owners about partnership where we could bring in our expertise to get their sites developed, and they tell us, "Well, it's not that complicated. We'll just hire an architect. We'll hire a contract, and why do we need you? What expertise does a developer bring?" What's your answer to that?
Great question. You know, unless you understand this field, unless you have the deep level of expertise required, yes, you can go do it yourself. But A, it's going to be really painful and challenging, but B, it's not going to cost you less. In fact, it will likely be more expensive and you'll have more problems overall as a result. Now, that's just the first project. If you keep with it over a number of years, you will gain those expertise. You will be able to achieve the cost savings that we have been able to do, and yourself as well. But there's a hurdle there, right? It gets harder before it gets easier, and it's important to remember that. And so you just have to think about what your strategy is. Is your strategy to build one building or maybe a couple of buildings for a specific project? If so, don't 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 skin your knee. I promise you. Hire someone that knows what they're doing, that can be excellent in that field for you. Now, if your strategy is different, that you want to make this a part of your core business, you want to do a lot of them going forward, then yeah, you're willing to scrape your knee, to screw up a few times so you can gain the expertise and you can be successful long term.
Right. How do you finance projects? Do you have any specific tricks? Are you doing anything different? Where do you get the equity? Where do you get the debt? How do you typically structure them?
Yeah. So here's the magic. If your cost of a project is 20 to 30% less than the market, guess what? Banks are typically willing to fund about 75% of the value of a project. Now, for the developer people out there, they immediately know there's things like loan to cost and other factors that can bring down those loan proceeds. But you can work it out with the bank. When our costs are as low as they are, you can work it out with the bank in such a way that we've essentially not had to bring any equity to make our projects happen. There's more details to that, but that's essentially what we've done. So we've been able to have basically infinite IRRs and infinite growth. We've not been limited by capital historically. Now, in today's market, things have changed. Interest rates have climbed and LTVs have gone down to something like 55%. I wish our costs were 45% less than everyone else. They're not. And so we've had to raise capital to bridge that gap. And so for us, we've been raising it through things like preferred equity is one way you can do that. Creative options right now are ground leases. That's been a really interesting strategy because the cost of a ground lease is quite a bit less, and the ground lease never needs to be repaid. So there's some interesting dynamics there you can take advantage of. There are the traditional banks, but if you're willing to pay a little bit more, you can go the hard money route, and there's stretch senior loans that will oftentimes kind of bridge a lot of that gap. And then for the pure equity side, getting money from JV partners today is hard unless you already have those relationships. Um, but one kind of unique approach we took is we launched a new, let's call it fund, where everyday retail investors can actually invest with us and they earn a fixed rate of return, about 10%. And they can lock that between 6 months and 2 years. And it feels a little bit like a CD. It's not. It's an investment product. It's actually regulated by the SEC as a Reg A, but it feels like a bank account. You can log in, deposit money, and get money back out. And then we take those funds and actually invest them into our projects. And then the last kind of, I suppose, kind of creative solution that we've been working on is also an international fund. And that's interesting because the cost of capital internationally is a little bit less because we're offering dollar denominated investments. And with those funds, you're now tapping into just huge sums of money. The people we're talking with are, billionaire level status. And the minimum investment size there is like $5 million in investment. But that's becomes a very powerful vehicle to providing the equity to our projects.
Interesting. So the domestic fund that you have, is it fully liquid? People could put money in and take them out, or are they locked in for the duration of the projects?
They're locked in for the duration of the term they select. So if they pick 6 months, they can pull the money back out in 6 months. If they select 2 years, they can pull it back in 2 years. Then behind the scenes, we can monitor the kind of expirations of all those loans, and then we can time our, for us, it's construction projects that typically last about 2 years, and so we can actually time the funding, the cash flows of those projects to the cash flows of the investors.
I see. But the investors don't get to participate in the upside of the project. That's just a straight
That's correct.
interest.
That's a really a retail product. It basically gives them a CD-like product at just a higher interest rates than they can get from typical bank finance or bank CDs.
Got it. And so you must have a separate division of your company specifically focused on fundraising and promoting investment opportunities domestically and internationally. Is that right?
It's our finance department, but yes, they handle all the investment raises, and I'm involved in that substantially as well. And then, but they also handle the traditional checkbooks and making sure cash flow is happening appropriately and stuff.
Right. Excellent. One question that I can't not ask you is what is becoming a unicorn?
Yeah, so Becoming a Unicorn is our own podcast where we look at the journey of groups that have gone from small enterprise to billion-dollar scale. One of my favorite podcast episodes was with Michael Usland. He's the originator and the executive producer of Batman. And when he was fairly young, he was able to pull a few investors together to buy the movie rights to Batman. And he felt, well, this is a slam dunk. People are going to love this movie and this concept. But everywhere he turned, everyone he spoke to, every studio he connected with, slammed the door in his face and said, no, there's no way that you're making a dark and serious Batman movie. Well, he fought for 10 years before getting someone to back him on that. And as you can see now, he launched this whole genre of dark and serious superhero movies. And when we were talking with him, he was actually on set with the new Joker movie at the time. But fun podcast. And really, that's the kind of stories we like to chronicle.
Love it. We'll have to check it out.
Awesome. Yes.
Anything else, Mike, you'd like to add before we wrap up?
The big thing I'd say is just don't be afraid to try. We talked, make sure it's something that's part of your purpose and your mission, and that's where you want to head. But once you know that, you're going to scrape your knee. You're going to screw up a few times. That's okay. That's part of the process. And the people that are successful, I have found, are the ones that are willing to endure that pain to see that success.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mike. How does one get in touch with you?
The best way is to visit our website. That's norhart.com, norhart.com.
Excellent. We'll have that link in the episode description. Mike, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Mike Kaeding's in the building, hear the name, get acquainted. Residential real estate, he's the one that changed it. From the ground up, every trading house ain't it. Plumbers, electricians, HVAC, they all made it. He's taking lessons from manufacturing's rise, applying them to construction, revolutionize productivity up, cost down, realize in 9 months what took 15, he defies. He's a real estate builder, breaking all the molds, tech and efficiency, the future he unfolds. Apartments built in record time, stories told. Mike Kaeding, transforming with a vision bold. Mike Kaeding, Mike Kaeding, Mike Kaeding, Mike Kaeding. Yeah, Mike Kaeding's in the building, hear the name, get acquainted. Residential real estate, he's the one that changed it. From the ground up, every trading house ain't it. Plumbers, electricians, HVAC, they all made it. He's taking lessons from manufacturing's rise, applying them to construction, revolutionize productivity up, cost down, realize in 9 months what took 15, he defies. Real estate builder, breaking all the molds, tech and efficiency, the future he unfolds. Apartments built in record time, stories told. Mike Kaeding, transforming with a vision bold.